All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Part 5, Powerhouse Student Voice with Adam Fletcher. We're really excited about today's presentation. And if you need today's presentation, a PowerPoint, like I said before, click on that link that's posted in the chat area, and it'll take you right to those materials. Adam, are you ready?
Absolutely.
All right, it's all yours.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, everybody. My name is Adam Fletcher, and for the last 20 years, I've been working with K-12 schools across the United States and around the world, focused on the subject of student voice, along with that student engagement and meaningful student involvement and a couple other ways to slice the apple that are all really delicious and huge. And yeah, it's good stuff. Before I get going this morning, though, I just want to take a quick poll, but we'll do it simple over in the chat. We're just so you know, before we get going, a few housekeeping things. First thing is that today's presentation isn't just, I'm not going to just talk at you. I will have questions that I ask you throughout, and I'll put those into the chat as well as say them out loud, and you'll be responding via the chat. I don't do breakout activities because we only have an hour, and trust me, it's going to go fast. And the third thing is that there's no sales pitch here. There's nothing to sell. These are ideas, this is work, and this is what you do, this is what I do. And it's my pleasure, my honor, really, to be here in this space and share it with you. So I want to thank you all for joining in and listening in and participating as we go along. So to get us going, over in the chat, 1 through 3, 1 means you're just starting, you've never heard of it. 2 means you're on board, but you're still learning about it. 3 means you think you're an expert and you know exactly what is student voice. 1, 2, or 3 for you. Your level of knowledge, expertise, ability, however you want to say it. So we're getting a lot of 1s, a lot of 2s. 1s, 2s. Picture us in that conference room, and you look across the room and everybody has their finger up in the air. So it's a little bit quicker of a sweep that way, but this still works. All right, cool. Thank you all for sharing that. Poulsbo is a beautiful town in Washington, just so everybody knows. So we're going to cover a lot in the next hour, and actually 52 minutes. And as we do, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have ideas, drop them into the chat. If you have a random reflection, something you want to share with the whole group, remember everybody sees that space, but use it. I mean, let's just have a conversation here. And we'll see it as we go along. April's going to keep dropping this link in. This link is filled with all the past content that I've covered for TechBit, so check those out. This is the fourth of 6, fourth of 5, fourth of 6, fourth of 5, fourth of 5. Okay, so we have another presentation at the end of the month, and just really doing some awesome things and covering some great ground here. So as you take a look through those other materials, make sure that you're keeping in mind, they all kind of pack together really nicely. If you're just joining us for the first time for Powerhouse Student Voice, I'm not going to be redundant. I won't cover a lot of what I have, but you can definitely look back on those prior presentations and get the whole gist. And the whole topic is around online student engagement. You all are in the middle of some hard work. We're doing things in schools that we've never done before. 20 years ago, I had the opportunity to work for Washington State's education agency as their first ever student engagement specialist. I had taught in a classroom. I had been working in youth programs. I'd done all kinds of things over the years with young people around youth empowerment, but I hadn't had an opportunity to look at schools and really study schools for what they meant. So I did a 3-year action research project. I talked with more than 10,000 students and 3,000 educators here in Washington State. I traveled around the country and had a chance to do a little international work, and found out that people in the States, we don't really know about student engagement the way that people have been working with it in Europe very intentionally for more than 50, 60, and 70 years. Which isn't to say that we're behind. It's to say that we're in a different space in our education evolution. I know the work of being in classrooms. I know the work of leading schools, and I know that it's very, very difficult. My master's is in ed leadership and policy studies, and I don't come to this work lightly. I have grandparents who are teachers. I have lots of my family, and my 17-year-old daughter, who's a senior in high school right now, keeps me real the entire time. So if you want to talk about youth empowerment for a job, for a profession, go ahead and have a kid or a few and see how that goes for you, because it's a constant check and balance on all of the dreamy, lofty things that I would like to say versus the reality of what and how she actually lives, and the way that young people and teachers live every single day. It's very important to me. So as we go through today, we're going to talk about some different ideas. I'm going to share with you some frameworks that I've established over the years. And those frameworks, we're going to unpack them, and you're going to look at your own experience and do some reflecting. And it's going to be interesting. So again, I want to encourage you, questions, comments, concerns, considerations, drop them in the chat. The other thing that I need to mention is that I am the CEO of a nonprofit called Youth and Educators Succeeding. We're based here in Olympia, Washington, just south of Seattle, north of Portland. We offer a curriculum internationally called Gen Yes. Our curriculum teaches students to support schools in their technology needs. We have been slammed busy during the pandemic because it turns out technology a little bit important to schools right now. That's a little bit of a joke, but not to make light of a very serious situation, but to say that you all have resources in the form of those humans who sit in your classrooms and go to your schools every single day and sit at home on their computers and in all the other spaces that they are right now. So this is about how to engage them ultimately. But we're going to look at a specific element of student engagement today, and it's called student voice. Student voice isn't the same as student engagement. They're two different things. Some people use them synonymously, but for everything that we've covered so far, we're not necessarily going to talk about those differences too much. Let's jump into this PowerPoint and see where it goes. Before we get started, I just want to touch base on the whole concept of this online student engagement conversation, what we've been talking about over the months now. Student involvement, excitement, and engagement in online learning environments. That's really been our focus. We've talked about useful frameworks, best practices, facts, successful engagement, online youth culture, and practical implementation. Today, we're in that useful frameworks category. We're going to get into some factual stuff and some successful things. The next session is focused really on tools to engage students online. We're going to dial in specifically on that. So if you're really here for the how-to and the real direct things to do and all of that, that's great, that's cool. We'll have you covered in the next session. There's a little plug for that, but let's take a jump into here. A few years ago, I published a book called Student Voice Revolution, the Meaningful Student Involvement Handbook. This is a 400-page behemoth. It's scary. It's research-based. It's driven by my work in schools over the last 20 years. I've supported more than 500 schools across the US, all focused on this notion of building student voice. What is Powerhouse Student Voice? In the meantime, this nonprofit that I work for has worked with just over 2,400 schools in the last 24 years with this Gen Yes program. At the heart of Gen Yes is this burning engine that to summarize it, it is student voice. This definition of student voice on your screen, take a look at it with me. Student voice is any expression of any student, anywhere at any time for any purpose as it relates to learning, schools, and or education. Take a minute and unpack that with me. Student voice isn't any expression of any student anywhere at any time for any purpose as it relates to schools, learning, or education. So yeah, there's a whole lot going on there. I just typed a question in the chat. It says, any student. Please respond to me and tell me, what students have you, and be specific. Give me demographics, give me an idea of the learners who you teach, what students, the learners that you interact with, the learners that you represent, whatever your role is. Give me a sense of what students have you heard student voice from. So when I ask that question in other spaces, people will tell me, oh, I heard it from Honor Society. Barbara says special education, second and third graders, special education, high school. Give me some more. This is exactly what I'm going for. High school special education students. Who else do we hear student voice from? There are no wrong answers here. Let me just open that up right now. High school band and drama students, clubs, disengaged students. My own teenage boys. These young people, I'll tell you what. K-12 students, all of them, 4 and 5-year-olds, EL students. These are going to go fast. High school psychology students, student athletes, Native American bilingual classes, granddaughter, parents, high school students involved in athletics, high school creative students, my wife. So just a note, student voice is specific to students. A little bit different from parent voice, a little bit different from teacher voice. And those are all things that are valid and they all matter. Today, we're going to focus on the student element. So when we say any, we're talking about every learner in every school all the time. This could include students who are misbehaving, students who don't do what we want them to, as well as the students who do what we want them to. That might mean the Honor Society students. That might also mean the hungry students. That might also mean the students who skip schools, as well as the students in the honors classes and AP classes. So all of these students have a voice and multiple voices simultaneously at the same time. Then it says it's anywhere. Student voices anywhere. What are some of the places where we can hear student voice? Literally, what are some of the places, the physical places, the mental spaces? What are some of the places? Just drop me into the chat really quick. What are some of the places where we can hear student voice? And I challenge you all to teach me something. Social media, cafeteria, at home, online, social media in the classroom, hallways, classroom, team meetings. Give me some more. Keep going. Assignments, playground, classroom, stores, at their jobs, anywhere, games, around town, gym, playground, writing, home, online private discussion rooms, coffee shops. Excellent. All of this is excellent. Remember that the focus of student voice, you see right here at the end of this definition, it's as it relates to learning, schools, and or education. That's not limited to one convenient space where adults happen to be listening on purpose at that moment. So you don't have to have a special student forum for 500 students in your building to gather together to have conversations about schools. They can be doing it in all these spaces that you just listed and many more. Texting is another space that could be on there. Somebody said video games, but gaming servers. These guys have whole conversations, whole online lives in these gaming servers. So lots of different spaces can hold these conversations. And then it says anytime for any purpose. So student voice can be the students who put on the tie and they go to the school board to present on the service learning projects that they did in their school. And that is phenomenal. One of the things that we do with the Gen Yes program is have students do those presentations and work with teachers. And when they work with teachers and they're talking about their technology use, they are sharing student voice. So that's another way that student voice can happen. But any time for any purpose, that sounds like a whole lot of things. My favorite example is the kid who runs out in the hallway after he's sent to the principal's office and he pulls out the Sharpie marker from his backpack and he writes on the wall, "Mrs. Jones sucks." And then he runs off to the principal's office because he got sent there. That student, even though I don't like how they did it and what they said, just shared student voice. The kid with the Sharpie marker who just wrote on the locker, "Mrs. Jones sucks," just shared student voice. So it's not a question of whether or not students are willing to share student voice. It's whether or not adults are willing to listen. So we're going to unpack that a little bit and get to more of what that means and what that looks like. But in the meantime, April asked a great question, but do we really want to hear student voices? As adults, are we prepared to listen? And that's where we're going to dive into. So what I'd like you to do right here, we're going to take a moment and just have a little brainstorming. Robin says yes. So we've got one yes, April. Yes. And just as a note, everybody sees the acronym for the name of the nonprofit, Youth and Educators Succeeding, is yes. So here we go. Thank you, Robin. That was a great endorsement. I'll take that as a plug. The brainstorm here is ways students share voices. So drop for me in the chat, just this is a big, broad question. What are the ways that you know students share student voice right now? There's no wrong answer. Just drop something in there. And I want to challenge everybody to put at least one thing. Specific ways that they share it. So April said peers, but how do they share it with their peers, April? Sean said actions. Tammy said poems. TikTok, social media, texting. Ways students share their voices through texting, social media, and casual conversations, chat, pictures, teams, chat, memes. What else? Attitude. I'm going to go with attitude, and I wrote behavior, drawings in their notes, Instagram, the way they dress, physical actions, defiance, and lack of purpose. I wrote types of language, meaning not just the name of the language that they speak, but also the ways that they speak that. I was a dorky kid and I spoke Pig Latin all the time. It was like my secret way of communicating with my friends. And I thought it was all special and stuff until my mom was like, we've been doing that since back then. So the types of language, music, artwork, disengagement, lack of effort. How do students share student voice? Texting. Specific in texting, I'm going to write emojis. They have a whole language of emojis that I still don't know, and I don't really care anymore. It's just too much. Sign language, formal and informal, writing. All right, so keep thinking of those. The students who go to the back of the school building to smoke their cigarettes during the break, they're sharing student voice just by doing that action. The people they surround them with, they vape now. Thank you for that correction. The students who make a beautiful banner that says "Stay positive during testing," and they tape that across the wall. They're sharing student voice. The students who get in the fight in the hallway in front of 5 teachers as they're in passing period, they're sharing student voice. Oh, what's the popular one with all teachers everywhere right now who are working online with students? They turn off their monitor. They turn off their camera. That is sharing student voice. Zoom. Thank you, Jennifer. Encouraging videos. Thank you, John. So lots of ways that student voice is shared. None of those are wrong. All of those are right answers. And I bet you know double as many off the top of your head right now, especially now that we've gotten going. Let's unpack what student voice is not, though, because a lot of people are using this phrase willy-nilly. They're just throwing it around, and they're using it in a lot of ways. Let's unpack what it is not. Student voice is not a program, strategy, or activity in a school. It is not a single one of those. It's all of those and so much more, but it is not a single one of those. So if you have a program at your school that's called the Student Voice, great. It's great that you have that program. And is that all student voice? Does that represent all students? Nah, not really. If you have a student who is the representative to your district school board to share what students think about a given topic, are they sharing a student voice or even many student voices? Sure. Are they sharing all student voices? And is that the student voice? Nope. So it's a strategy, meaning that we can engage student voice in classrooms, but it's not the only strategy, and it's part of many strategies. So it's not just a strategy. And a program. There are organizations actually across the country that are called Student Voice, but there is not one student voice. There is a plethora. So anyway, student voice is not a program, strategy, or activity in school. Student voice is not the same as student leadership or student engagement. Some people use those synonymously, like it's all one thing. Student leadership is student voice. Student engagement is student voice. And while both of those are expressions of student voice, neither one of those are the only student voice. So because you have students who are either democratically elected or appointed to be on a student council or a student government where they get to decide the colors of the dance and the theme for the year, that doesn't necessarily mean that is the student voice. Because again, all those things that you already mentioned in the chat, all of those are forms of student voice as well. The next one says, student voice is not an instructional approach or technique. Student voice is part of instructional approaches like project-based learning, like service learning, like ed tech, like so many different instructional approaches, but it is not the instructional approach. Student voice is also not just a technique. it is part of techniques to get students to become engaged and do other things throughout schools, but it's not a technique per se. Student voice is more than that. Student voice is not just a treat for well-behaving or high-performing students. Some schools award students by listening to them. And that's not what student voice is. Student voice is always present. The question is whether or not we are always capable of hearing what students are saying. And then the final bullet point here is student voice is not the be-all end-all. It is not a silver bullet or panacea. That means that it's not going to fix things. It's not going to make everything better all of a sudden. 20 years ago, and in the 20 years since, students have experienced more student voice than in a long time. In my research, I found examples and people using the phrase student voice going all the way back to the 1930s. And to think that if we had started in the 1930s and had a constructivist approach to building student voice in schools, where we would be today, where students, their voices would be constantly heard and constantly infused throughout every conversation affecting them in education. But we're far from that. And just in my career of working with schools to build student voice, it's been an experience of learning and listening and seeing a lot of optimism and a lot of hope, but maybe at times too much emphasis on fixing and solving things with student voice rather than hearing students because they're valid human beings that we need to hear, whether or not something's getting fixed or healed or mended. So student voice is part of many things, but in and of itself, it's valuable just because it's any expression of any student about schools. So learning to listen to student voice, learning to engage students on purpose, these are tools in our quiver, but not the only tools. But let's talk about what student voice is then. Student voice is inherent anywhere where students exist, anywhere. It's just there, right? Right now, I get an experience of student voice in this workshop, in this space that we share. Now, this is a more ethereal space because it's online, blah, 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 blah. But we're used to this now, and you all know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of us have our cameras tilted and we're just seeing the bottom part of your mouth. Some of us have our cameras turned off. Some of us are, might have our arms crossed, or we're staring blankly off to the side, and all of these things. And these are all fine responses. I'm not attached to you doing one thing because I know better than that in this space. In any other workshop, I get to sit in, my phone is my friend. So it's all good. But because it helps me focus, it helps me pay attention to do things simultaneously. That said, that's all student voice because we're all learners in a learning space right now. So student voice is inherent anywhere students exist. Student voice is within earshot of all educators and parents. So again, that goes back to the idea that all students are always sharing student voice. The question is whether or not we are willing and able to hear it as educators, as parents. So student voice is always within earshot of educators and parents. Student voice is easily misunderstood and easily manipulated. Now that's a lot to pack into one little bullet point, and we'll unpack that a little bit more as we go along. But the whole point being that it's one thing to hear student voice, it's another thing to interpret it. And it's another thing yet to make it say what we want it to say. Are students amenable to that? Well, you and I both know we've gotten the stink eye from students who are just like, you are not telling the truth right now, we know. So I don't think we're fooling them when we try to say, well, the student said that we should do this. But man, can we pull one over on other adults? I have this bad behavior of writing academic papers. And I will tell you that there are very few journal reviewers who I can't get things past right now because they're so used to my work and my writing. I can tell them that students said X, Y, and Z over and over and over. Whether or not students said it is irrelevant because I read the data, I interpret the data, I know what students say. I sit with students, I work with students, yada, yada. And I can manipulate student voice in this way. It's kind of dark juju magumbo. You all know in your own experience, whether or not you're the most successful classroom teacher ever, or a counselor, or a school leader of any sort, we have these opportunities to hear students. And when we go back to other school people and say, well, the student said, at that moment, we've moved from listening to student voice to interpreting student voice. And that's where student voice can be easily misunderstood and manipulated. So The next bullet point is even a little bit more harsh. Student voice is largely ignored, misinterpreted, and denied. Don't be gentle with me on this. If you have something to say, drop it right there in the chat. But I will say this. If our school body is made up of if it's a pie chart, the average school, research has shown that the average school in the United States of America is 92% students, 8% adults in that school building. Think about the proportion of adults to students in your own building. What would you put that number at? So if it's 92% students, out of that student body, which student voice do we actually listen to and engage on purpose every single day? Well, Adam, I ask my students all the time, what do you think about class? How is my assignment going? How did you do this evening? All of that are examples of student voice. So if you do that, thank you. Keep doing it and do it more. If you do not do that, this section is for you. It's not that you necessarily ignore student voice on purpose. It's not that you misinterpret student voice on purpose. And it's not that you're denying student voice quote on purpose. But a lot of the issues that we're dealing with across our society are reflected in the way that we hear students, that we listen to students. And I'll say this gently because we all have different language around it, but for the sake of saying it, as a person who identifies as a heterosexual white male of middle class, I have certain ways that I listen to students that are innate to who I am. That doesn't mean that I can't change. That doesn't mean that I can't do better. And that's what I aspire to do all the time. But I'll tell you what, when I'm looking across a room of girls, I have to make a point to, with a couple of boys, and I ask people to raise their hands and respond to a question, I have to make a point to not call on the boys automatically. Because that's just the hand. Hey, look, it's the loud guy. Hey, look, it's the anxious guy. Hey, look, it's the guy who wants to. Hey, look, it's the quiet guy. And then there's like 28 young women who are in this class as well. And I have an obligation to hear their voices as well. In a similar way, I might do the same thing with people of socioeconomic standing, with people who speak English first. It might be easier for me to listen to English first. And so I listen to students who speak English as a first language. And in that way, I'm biased with my student voice. So student voice is largely ignored, misinterpreted, and denied. Might also have to do with age. I don't know what your all's experiences with this, but I will tell you that I have found with student voice and the whole idea of listening to students on purpose and asking them what they think about schools and learning and teaching and all of the questions. I go into a room of grade school students and begin these conversations, and they are so excited. Nobody has ever asked their opinion before about this, and it's just so cool, and you can imagine the bubbling noise. I'm sure that some of you have that experience in about 30 minutes. But the point is that energy is real. It's palpable for these elementary students. Sometimes I can go into a room of high school students and ask them the exact same frame, the exact same questions, and there's crickets chirping in the background. And then middle school students, they're right in that spot where they have some of that resonant like excitement from grade school and some of that wizened calmness of high school, and like they're kind of in that middle ground. But we always have to find which students are we most apt to listen to. It's our high school students who get the opportunity for a lot of leadership at our district level or at our building levels. So which students do we ignore? Which students do we misinterpret? And that can be literal in terms of language. It can be figurative in terms of intention, all kinds of things. And then the last bullet point, a student voice is worthy of our investment, including our educational investment, our emotional investment, and our financial investment. Our educational investment, this is where I begin to differ from other people. So if you're a 3 on that self-measurement of student voice knowledge, listen close. I might get you here. The educational investment in student voice is a tricky thing. If I go to a student and ask them what they think of the structure of the curriculum and the way that it's assessed, if that student is in grade 3, they might not have anything to report to me. Go figure. Sometimes if they're in grade 12, they might not have anything to report to me. If I go to that student and teach them what is curriculum, what is assessment, what, you have, and then also teach them, you have a voice worth hearing. You have a way to express that voice, and you have somebody who's going to listen when you share that. If I teach them those things, they'll have more to share with me than if I just go in and say, what do you think of curriculum and assessment and the framing of this question? So that's an educational investment in student voice. And that's very specific to asking students about schools in general. When No Child Left Behind came out, we were challenged as educators to really begin to frame our classes and to help students understand the goals that were the goals that were expected of them to achieve. Right? We began to have to explain and share rubrics and go through all these processes to help bring learners into our space. This is an example of investing in student voice. But now that you've invested in student voice, have you actually engaged with student voice? And that's where the emotional and the financial components come in. Financial just means time in many aspects. Financial might also mean technology or different ways that we can listen to student voice on purpose, but whatever that is. And then the emotional investment. And you all know that better than most folks. The emotional investment in student voice, it can take work because sometimes students can say things we don't want to hear. So over in the chat really quick, things we don't want to hear from students. And you can speak generally, you don't have to be specific to you, but what things do we not want student voice to share? I can't, we don't want to hear that. No, we don't want to hear that. No, what do we do again? Complaining. This is ridiculous. Do I have to learn that? This isn't fair. That's not fair. Things that are hurtful. Mrs. Jones sucks. Nobody wants to hear that. I don't want to. This is boring. That's my favorite phrase. This is boring. I resonate with it. Why? I'm not good at this. What do we not want to hear from students? I'll never be able to do that. I'll never go there. I'll never, whatever. When will we ever use this? I don't know. I don't care. I don't want to. I can't do it. Gosh, you guys are good. I feel like you might hear this every now and then. I hate this. It's just the right to do what I want. It's my right to do what I want. Thank you, Robbie. Where are we going to use this in real life? What's the point of this? It's just school. Why is everybody freaking out? Whew, those came fast. Keep going. Will we ever have fun in here? Why do we have rules? This list goes on and on. The point of asking that, of why we, or what we don't want to hear from students, think broadly about it. Oh, why do we have to go to school? I mean, all of these questions are just nested inside of all kinds of things that we don't want to hear. So then the flip side of that is, what do we want to hear? So drop that for me in the chat. What do we want to hear? What do you want to hear student voice about? And this could be, again, you specifically or in general. You want to hear thank yous. You want to hear, I'll try that. You want to hear, I love this. We want to hear what they like. We want to hear solutions. What else do we want to hear from students? We want to hear hidden messages. We want to hear ideas. We want to hear, Alicia says, we want to hear Mrs. Pope's class is the best. I know what I'm doing now. Questions. I need help with. We have all kinds of things that we want to hear from students. This is difficult, but worth it. Nobody's getting rich off the number of times that one was said, April. Pencils working furiously. Yeah, we don't want to hear them. We want to hear their pencils working. I got it. I want to do that. How can I? I understand. I've learned so much today. I like that. What if? These are great. Thank you so much. And they really begin to show the power of student voice. I mean, to be frank, if we heard all of these things every single day, what kind of educators would we be? How would we feel about our work every single day if this is what we heard all day long? I can use this. Thank you. This is fun. I like that. I've learned so much. I've just been accepted for a scholarship. Also, maybe along with that statement, Alicia, we also have, I just got accepted by my peers, or I just got accepted by my parents, or my schoolwork is valued by everybody around me. Oh, wait, that's different. You get the point. There's all kinds of things that we want to hear from student voice. So when we begin to unpack that, though, we wonder, how can we engage? How can we listen to student voice on purpose? How can we engage student voice on purpose? Now, if you've been in our other sessions, you've seen this cycle. This is my cycle of engagement. And I pose it to anybody who really wants to go and do, I want to do this today, Adam. What do I do? What do I just take and do? And I'm going to give you 5 simple steps to do something with student voice. 5 simple steps. Voila! Step number 1, you listen to student voice. Now, part of the challenge of student voice is that most educators believe that listening to student voice is all that you do with student voice. And that is not true. Listening to student voice is the start, but it's not the finish. We've listed some ways that we can listen to student voice. So we have that begun. The second step is as important as the first one. We listen to student voice and then we validate student voice. Validating student voice, it's kind of like when you drive your car out of the parking garage and you get the stamp and it lets you go for free. It's somebody saying, I see you as a fellow human being. It doesn't mean saying yes automatically. It doesn't mean saying maybe automatically. Sometimes it might mean saying no. To validate you as a human, sometimes I have to say no to you, because in that way I'm respecting you enough to say no. Back in the olden days, I don't know how old anybody is here and I don't really need to know, but back in some olden days, there was a movement to listen to students. And educators would go into a classroom and let students have the reins. Here, take the reins. This lasted for about 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 1 year, depending on how ambitious you were. I've only read research about it, and I've talked with a lot of educators about those days. They were well-intended, they were good meaning, but when students started proposing, what I really want to do to fix the school and make it better, I want to paint everything neon green, and I want to paint marijuana leaves on every wall, and I want to put long shag fur carpet everywhere all throughout the building, and I want to be able to wear my bell bottoms to football practice. And when that's how they responded, teachers had to say no. And that's where they left it. So it's not just saying no, it's unpacking that, it's opening it up. And the answer is, well, it's the 70s, so we can have some shag carpet here in school, let's try that out. But we're not going to put marijuana leaves in every hallway, and we're not going to wear bell bottoms to football practice, and. So there I'm trying to allude to it being some kind of olden days in the 60s and 70s, right? The point is that we validate student voice by saying yes, sometimes by saying no, sometimes by asking more questions. And really that's the heart of student voice, is that it's an inquiry process where we're asking, where we're working with students to help them explore. It's not just that you shared that thing, it's you tell me why you shared that thing. You tell me why we did this thing. You tell me what you got out of this thing. But that also gets further on in the cycle. We'll get there in a minute. After we listen to students, after we validate students, the third step is to authorize students. When I use this word, authorize, I look at the core word, which is author, to be able to tell your own story. So when we authorize students, we give them permission, and that's really the summary phrase right there, give permission to students to be able to do something. We give them authority. Now this is tricky because some people think that automatically means, well, you're giving them the neon green paint to paint the hallways whatever they want to. And the answer is no. We're going to negotiate, we're going to have inquiry, we're going to get to a space where when students have authority, they have the ability to have authority. I split authority into 2 areas. One is educating student voice, which we already talked about. And the other one is positioning student voice. When we position student voice, we give students an informal or a formal position, a literal job to do, so that student voice isn't just the act of informing me as an educator, it's the act of doing something inside of a school. So think about your own classroom, think about your own program. What positions do students have? The very first position that all students have is learner. So I'm just going to type that one in there. What other positions do students have in your classrooms or schools? Anybody drop something in there. If it helps you, if you have a Gen Yes program, think about Gen Yes. What positions, formal or informal positions, do students have in Gen Yes? Think about all those different ways that students share voice. Robin said influencers. Vera said listener, advocate, class officers. These are all positions. Excellent. Keep going. What else? What other positions do students have? Formal or informal? How can we authorize them to share student voice? Team captain, band members, friend. Thank you, Joan. There's a position that every student can have. But if it's not friend, what other position can students have? Thespian, athletic council, collaborative grouping. Thank you, Glenda. Class leader. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you to all of you. Keep going. What other positions can students have in schools? Formal or informal? Side partner. They can be a peer leader from within their group. Peer counselor, whether formal or informal. That's a great point. Thank you, Alicia. That peer counselor, that role of the friend who helps other students either on purpose or by accident. There's lots of things in here. We can also put mediator. We can also put, tutor, supporter, parents. There's all kinds of roles that students can have. And Linda, what you did right there, you begin to flip the script a little bit, because students don't leave their positions that they have at home. They don't leave them behind when they go through the school door when they're not going to school. So if a student is a parent and they're at home learning right now, when do they stop being a parent? When they go to school, when do they stop being a parent? If a student is a worker and they're at home right now, do they get to stop working in order to spend time in school? Do they stop being workers when they're in the physical building? So there's all kinds of ways that these roles begin to play out. These are all forms of authority. Do adults validate those? Do teachers have a role for these students all of the time? Maybe, maybe not. Are there some roles that we give to students on purpose and some that they just assume? Maybe, maybe not. Alicia brings up another great point. Thank you for this, Alicia. Alicia says bully. Now, bully is a role of authority. Who gives students the role of the bully? Any guesses on that? If you're a bully, where did you get that role from? Peers? Parents? We could put all kinds of things here. Media, thank you, Fred. Experiences. That role comes from all kinds of places. This cycle of student engagement, I'm going to pose that none of us would intentionally give a student the role of a bully. But there might have even been experiences in the student's past where teachers failed to give that student a role of authority and they assumed it, the role of the bully in turn. So that was kind of a self-given role rather than one that was bestowed upon them either informally or formally. So we have all kinds of different things that are beginning to shake out here in this authority component. Let's take a look at the next step on this cycle of engagement and really how to listen to student voice, how to engage student voice on purpose. We listen to students, we validate students, we authorize students. Then we take action with students. Now, when I go to students and I say, hey, how do you want to share student voice? They say, let's go do things. Let's make a banner. Let's have a forum. Let's spend time doing things. They want to just take action from the start. When I go to adults and say, hey, how do we engage student voice? They say, let's listen to students. So you can see how on this cycle, both of those have a place, but they're not just the place. They're not the only place. And then that last part of the cycle is reflection and really beginning to engage students in looking back on what they did, why they did it, and what they're going to do with what they did, right? You all know the triad of what, so what, now what, as a reflection cycle. And when we think of that, we can begin to see the ways that it unpacks pretty quickly. So what I'd like you to do right now, everybody should have a piece of paper or something to take notes on, a pen, anything laying around, no big deal. There you go. April's going to write on the back of something. All right, on your piece of paper, what I'd like you to do is draw the outline, a gingerbread cookie. Draw the outline of a person, but have room on the inside, room on the outside that you can write inside of. Does that make sense? Draw a gingerbread person. It does not have to be perfect. If yours looks like an alien, that is just fine. This is approximately what I want you to draw, or something to that effect, okay? On the inside of the person, I want you to write 5 attributes, 5 things that help students share student voice. 5 attributes that help students share student voice. There's no wrong answers here. Anything that you think needs to go there can. Think about all the ways that we've talked about student voice in our time together today. Five attributes that help students share student voice. And I typed that into the chat there for you. All right, I would love to see, actually, hold up your paper for me and just show me in the screen. Hold it up close so I can, that's what I'm talking about. All right, some folks have lists, some have the drawing. That's great. Cool, I love it. I'm seeing it. All right, so drop in the chat, give me some of those specifics, just one from your list if you want to. Drop in the chat one of your 5 attributes. Courage, thank you, Jeff. Trust, confidence, confidence. What else do students need inside of them to share student voice? Fear, need a little fear. Security, belief. Kindness, support, desire, fear. They need, want, confidence. Encouragement, acceptance, purposeful activities, belonging, kindness, voice. These are great. Now on the outside of your gingerbread person, of whichever gender you want or no gender at all, I want to see 10 ways to support student voice. These are 10 ways that you think you can support student voice, or that your school can support student voice. Be as specific as you can, drill right in. 10 ways to support student voice. Again, there's no wrong answer here. We're going to go quick on this. So take just one more minute. So it's basically like things around the student. 10 ways to support student voice. All right, drop one of those in the chat for me when you have your list. Drop one item in the chat. Creating a safe space, mentors, responding, encouragement, acceptance, acknowledgement, listening, show them that you love them, empowerment, leadership and direction from a mentor, give them authorization, teamwork, give them a role in class, build relationships, intentional listening. I love that. Open-mindedness. A lot of the time, student voice is simply seeking to be heard and listened to, and simply being open-minded and allowing yourself to hear without judging, allowing yourself to listen without responding can be an important element of student voice. Praise. All right, check this out. We're going to jump towards the end of the presentation now. We really only have fewer than 5 minutes left. So what does all of this mean? We brainstormed how some of those activities for students. One of the things that I found in my research and experience are these 6 spaces for student voice in schools. These are like big categories where everything else shakes into, although there's so many more, and you already have begun to share a lot of them. One of the spaces is teaching, students sharing student voice in teaching as teachers. Again, not trying to plug it too much, but just saying the Gen Yes program teaches students to teach teachers how to use technology in classrooms and how to support their peers. So students become those teachers in that informal way. We have districts over in Yuma, Arizona. The students have a PD day where they lead PD for teachers every year. so teachers can sit and listen to students grades 3 through 8 teach them about technology. And it's not show and tell, guys. I'm talking about students who are actually I'm sorry, don't use diminutive terms. They are experts in what they're talking about. They can use this technology in ways that it's still, I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me. So students as teachers, students as evaluators. Student voice in evaluation has a very powerful role in improving our classrooms. Whether that's just on the classroom level with you as an individual classroom teacher, or with you as a district or regional or state leader, or with you as a parent, students can evaluate curriculum. Students can evaluate themselves. Students can evaluate classroom climate. Students can evaluate their peers' performance in ways that adults we just can't do, as well-meaning teachers, as highly capable experts, as very opinionated people. Whatever we are, students bring their own unique lens to evaluation. Students as advocates, somebody mentioned that earlier. Students as planners, students actually writing curriculum, students participating in teacher hiring, students helping decide budgets for districts on lots of different areas. All of these are examples of that high level planning that students can participate in, but students also plan on the individual level every single day. They plan on that yearly level for themselves. So what would it look like if they planned on the classroom level? And I'm sure that some of you are already doing that. What would it look like if they planned on the building level, and not just the dance, not just the colors or the theme or the mascot, but what would it look like if students were involved in planning your school in a substantial way? Then finally, research, students as researchers, and then students as decision makers. Students as decision makers is one of the most powerful opportunities that we have. Again, not just on the personal level, but on the group, classroom, building, and district and state level, and even beyond that. There's a movement right now nationally to have students involved in the next administration's education department in a substantial way that's probably going to happen. Follow Yes K-12, and I guarantee you're going to hear about that. All right, here it is. Final slide. This is Adam's drawing of joy and craziness. Now, if you have this really big, it will make some sense to you, hopefully. If you don't, basically the idea is where can student voice happen? All K-12 schools. It can happen. Oh, wait, those are those areas that we just said: teaching, planning, advocacy, research, decision-making, learning. And then I have climate on here as well. School districts, planning, decision, teaching, research, access, authority, direction, compliance. State education agencies, you know who you are out there. All of these different ways, and so much more. There's so many ways that student voice can be engaged. Now, if today's session was woefully short on your expectations and you want to learn a lot more, here you go. Check it out. YesK12.org. I put up a post on what is student voice just for this session. So you can read a little bit about it there under the, it's either called blog or articles. I don't remember which section that is now, but YesK12.org. Also follow us on social media. We're on Instagram and the Twitters, the Facebooks, basically sharing out information about students, student voice, technology, engagement, the whole 9 yards, all of the time. And all of that's available to you. I invite anybody to share any questions, comments, concerns, considerations in the chat. April just shared this wonderful feedback that she'll go ahead and plug. And that's all for my session for today on Powerhouse Student Voice. Thank you all very much.